Welcome back, everyone. We now begin with our next session, which is a technology track on building products from open source capabilities. Hope you are enjoying the session. For this, I would like to extend the warm welcome to Mr. Jaydeep Ruparelia, CEO and co-founder Infopercept. Can I have him on the stage? Hello, Mr. Jaydeep. Good morning. So, I extend a warm welcome to you. You may just go ahead and do the session.
Slides for us, Srishti? Srishti, can I see the slide? So my name is Jaydeep Ruparelia, and I'm going to present on building products from open source. So that's my topic of presentation, and I'm going to share how the open source world, where the culture is the collaboration, helping each other. The inputs are all towards building a right platform, and that's where we have also leveraging open source, build a cybersecurity integrated platform. So that has been our experience working with open source, which I'm going to share in this presentation today. So open source has always been supporting all different tools and also raising the cybersecurity standards as well. A lot of innovations has been seen from open source world with respects to the technologies as well as a lot of leading frameworks and practices. These are few of the examples where like Kali Linux, which is used for offensive security, has been used widely by most of the security firms for different level of test. We see innovation from open source across the landscape. It starts from perimeter security. We have the PF Sense, which has been used everywhere. We have Mode Security, which is a web application firewall. We have OSEC, which is for the endpoint security. Snort and Suricata, again used for the network security. Keycloak, again used for the identity access management. Elasticsearch for the visibility. So a lot of innovation across the landscape has already been seen by the open source community, and which has been used by a lot of customers to deploy these technologies within the environment. And in the same way, most of the frameworks, the leading practices has always come out as an innovation from the community. The OAuth top 10, again, for the web application security, Sense 25 for the web security, MyThreat framework for understanding the attacker's techniques and the procedure, CIS benchmarking, NIST. So a lot of contribution has already been there from the open source community. We can move next. And like mainly to understand why open source is born in cybersecurity, because it's always a better security when using an open source. It's already proven by the Red Hat and the Linux world. It's ease of the installation. Easy to install. You just get the packages from your GitHub and start using it. Lowers down the cost, which is a great advantage to have. You are allowed to customize the way you want for your requirement and make it tailor made. So that's the biggest advantage. Maintenance and support, like our experience with working with open source, we have got a very good support from open source community in terms of fixing the bugs, regular maintenance of it. It's just that we need to have the right collaboration with the community, help each other, and that what really helps. The software quality, as it is always built by the community, is a high quality software that are there, and the open source community is always very research and the passion driven. So that are the biggest advantage. I would say that in the cybersecurity world, open source is little late, but it's now moving very, very aggressively. So that's again an advantage. We can move next. See? So little background of Infopercept. Like we are a new age managed security service provider where we are integrating human expertise with open source innovation. As we are an MSSP, we carry a punchline as your ally in digital warfare. That's what we do for our customers. And with all our experience and leveraging open source, we have built an Invensense platform where we have considered a lot of attacker sense, and that's where we have given the name Invensense. And the punchline is a tactical cybersecurity sense, and which is used by us to provide our MSSP services, and now also used by a few partners globally to build an SOC, next generation SOC for the customers. We move next. So as Infopercept, our MSSP journey has been around three main pillars: optimization, integration, and open source. So we started with building our offensive security practices, our GRC practices, which is our red team, which is our pink team. Then we have our SOC for the blue team. A lot of technology implementation done by our purple team. And the way we have been doing is like we have never gone with an approach of supplying a solution to a customer or reselling a solution to a customer, but always understood what are the current investments and how to get an ROI out of it. So optimizing the existing investment and getting an ROI. And wherever we have seen a technology gap or the opportunity where we can install some new technologies also, we have always leveraged the open source all our journey from 2014 till 2019 also. So that has been our journey. And then with experiencing different point solutions, the open source point solutions, and implementing and having the success around it, we thought of how about integrating all these point solution and creating a platform out of it. And that's what we started building it. And in 2020, we released the version 1.0, which also got implemented with good number of clients. And then post all the integration and testing that was required, we have built the version 1.0 in 2021, and which is now used by large enterprises as well. So that has been our journey and how open source has helped us in the journey as well. We move next. So this is the typical boardroom scenario which we normally see when CISO is going to a boardroom and asking for various investments. And that time he's there to face various diverse attacks. And he's also facing the diverse opinions from various board members as well. So like CEO is always worried about how do I grow my business? So his pressure is on growing the business. CFO has the budget pressure. So he's pushing for the budgets and reducing the cost. CIO needs to meet the business requirement, and he's always talking about I need to do all the required stuff for my digital transformation to be very successful. CRO talks about like there are so many other risks that I need to address, and I need this to be taken care by you. So that's the kind of the boardroom discussion normally happens, and when there are a lot of people also required, the CHRO would say that how do I get all these people? So that's the major challenge which normally a CISO face in a boardroom when he's talking about adding security in the digital transformation journey. And then moving next, Srishti, when the landscape changes, there are a lot of initiatives that are taken, and landscape changes like the customer using the few cloud or one of the cloud or the on-premises, and then they suddenly start using multi-cloud, API, IoT. So a lot of introduction of different landscape. And then when we again goes to the boardroom, the challenge is that again they'll think that why again security is required. So that's the challenge. And that time we need to explain that the landscape is changed. So we can click next, Srishti. So the same solution which we're working on really becomes very difficult. So that's the major challenge which is there for the CISO. So that he keeps on explaining, and then probably when the people are demanded, he has to explain that the team is growing on the other side. You will have a lot of people on HR, marketing, sales, support, business side of it. But when it comes to security, it's always a lean team, and that's where he always has to demand that we need to increase the security team also. So these are the challenges. With this, what we have learned with all our experiences, how do we stay ahead of the adversaries? For that, you definitely need to innovate, and you need to have the right mechanism to prevent and detect more threats. We need to have the maximum visibility, where a lot of open source can definitely play a good role. The intelligence that are required, the actionable that are required, automation that can be done, the speed and the flexibility that is required. So those are the areas which we need to focus on. Definitely, the cost is going very high, so we need to look at the outsourcing. Customers. So that customization and tailor-made solution is a necessity. With doing all this, you definitely need a continuous collaboration with different communities the open source world. So those are the different requirements that are there to stay ahead of the advances. And with this, what we have also learned is when the cybersecurity tools are working in silos, it's not actually giving the right solutions for the customers. And that's where what we did is bringing a tight integration, which looks like a solution. So this in itself is a solution like drone, but drone again is not the solution. Drone requires a remote. That remote requires a human, and that human also requires the strategy. So with this, what we have done is we have built the required sense, which we call it as an InvenSense platform, which is a combination of the solution, services, and strategy, and where open source world has really helped us, the entire community. So this is how the overall integrated platform is built by us, where we have four different modules in it. The InvenSense CUDA, which is the Observe, Orient, Decide, Act, where we've used SIEM and EDR, where we use VASA as a technology, which allows us to cover all the different flavors of operating system, the Linux, Windows, Mac, all across the different landscape. And it also works as an SIEM for us, which is built on the ELK stack. So that also has the advantage of the ELK stack as well. And the way it works is like we have built a lot of use cases of onboarding all different data sources, also onboarding the different cloud environments like the AWS, Azure, Google. Uh, we've used a Shuffle for the orchestration and automation, which is the tool which we have used for the orientation. We have the Hive, which is for the incident ticketing system, Cortex for the threat analysis, and MISP for exchanging the threat. So that's the complete integration that we have done as part of our InvenSense UDA, and which is now used widely by a lot of our customers, and also partners have started pushing it. So that has become a good advantage of using an open source component, integrating it, and also contributing in terms of development also. So that's what we have done on all this technology that is on the UDA ground. And then it is supported by our process security operations. And our blue team is working on this particular UDA. Then we have InvenSense ODS, which is offensive defensive strategies, where we've used deception. Uh, so deception, we have used Teapot and Dijau, which we have implemented not only on premises and different clouds, but we also built certain decoys on the IoT environment also. So the entire landscape is being supported by the open source deception, I would say, and we have done a tight integration supported by our process technology optimization and our purple team behind it. So we build a complete integration, and this has really helped customers to detect more threats using deception, and that too focusing more on the unknowns. Then we have the InvenSense RBAS, which is again a combination of the red teaming, the offensive security practices, and we've used the breach and attack simulation, which is built by the Maitre framework itself. So Maitre is the community which is actually building this tool also, and we have built it, and we also customize it basis the requirements that we have, and this works very well integrated with our ODS and UDA as well. So that's the tight integration that we have achieved. And then we have built our compliance platform, which has different modules in it to support and to update the boardroom, where also we have used a lot of open source projects, the community based projects. It has different 7 modules. One is to define your vision and mission towards cybersecurity. It has the second module where you can do the enterprise risk management, where we are using simple risk to do the enterprise risk management. And we have the policy procedure module where we build all the policy procedure on the HTML rather than putting it in a Word document or a document management system. And that module works to help you to define all your policies and the procedures, and also adding the creative stuffs around it so that it becomes easy for the users to read and understand. Then we have used resource space for building the various cybersecurity culture awareness related content, where we have a lot of wallpapers, posters, screensavers, videos, quizzes, and all is getting managed by the resource space, which is again a open source project. And we have boardroom games where the customers can practice different scenarios like the ransomware. If there is a ransomware attack, then how is the finance team and different teams that are coming together reacting to it? So in case there is a real attack, then they are prepared before that. So the different kind of scenarios that can be practiced, and also different KPIs that are required for the top management to understand in the progress of the overall cybersecurity. And we've used open projects again to have the management of all the different cybersecurity projects that are working. So it has different modules, and this is also a compliance platform where all this development and everything is done by our team, and we are putting it as part of the open source community project again, supported by virtual CISO and the ping team. So that's the overall integrated cybersecurity platform that we have built. So in a nutshell, how it works is like we have 4 different modules: UDA, ARBAS, ODS, and GSOS. And it covers the different point solutions like the EDR, SIM, SOAR, incident case management, deception, breach and attack simulation, threat intel. So all these modules are also getting covered, tightly getting integrated as well. And it helps to build the next generation SOC with the seamless security operations, incident response, automation around it, a lot of increase in the overall detections, supporting in terms of the cybersecurity strategies that are required. And most importantly, we are focused on the attacker sense. And considering the attacker sense, we have built the overall integration for it, the threat intelligence that is required, and the visibility all across the landscape. So that's the takeaway of the overall integration and the platform that we have created leveraging open source. Move next. So just a little background on one of the module, which is the UDA from our side, where we have used VASA as an EDR and the SIM technology. So we have again compared it with the real life scenario while talking about UDA, where what we do is we install the agent all across the different operating system, and we onboard all different data sources to build various use cases, correlations, alerts, reports, which is more of a visibility, so that you are able to observe what the attacker is doing. So that's the stage 1 which we are achieving. Then once you see what the attacker is doing, what you need to do next is you need to understand the orientation of the attacker, whether he's trying to hit you on the head, leg, or your stomach. So that's the orientation which is required. And that's where we've used a combination of a Shuffle, the Hive, and Cortex, which is a SOAR for us. We are contributing to those projects as well. So Shuffle, we can do the required orchestration and automation. We can also compare it with various threat intels. Then we can also automatically open the tickets in the Hive. Cortex is for the various threat feeds and various analysis that are required. So a complete combination to set the right orientation of the attacker. We have built a very, I would say, very custom specific use cases to different clouds also using this technologies. And the third phase is where you need to decide, because again, in the cybersecurity world, you'll have a lot of technologies that are installed all across the landscape, from your perimeter to your application security, endpoint security, data security, database security. So a lot of technologies are installed all across the landscape. And that's where in the third phase, what you need to do is you need to have the right playbook to decide where exactly you need to write rules. And since this is an open source project that we have done, we were able to access any of the APIs wherever the APIs were available and write the rules the way we want. And we got a very good support from the community as well. And we were able to build a lot of different playbooks which actually are running now on different environments. So in the third phase, you decide whether you want to hit it on the leg, stomach, or head to the attacker. So those decisions are very important, where you take a decision to write a rule on your endpoint, firewall, email security, database. So different kind of technologies that can be leveraged in doing the incident response. So that is the third phase. And finally, you need to have certain actions to be defined, where you need to either block a particular IP address in your firewall, or isolate an endpoint, or quarantine a particular file, or execute some command in any of these services. So those are the different actions that are required. And the way this has worked is like we were able to set all the required visibility using the VASA as a platform, set the orientation of the attacker, basis the playbook that we have agreed, and wherever the APIs were available on all the technologies. So we have currently integrated more than 100 different technologies, and we can write the rules on those particular different technologies as well. So that's how different use cases have been built by us to meet the various requirements in the customer environment. Just as an example, in endpoint, when we are having the EDRs installed and we are able to see some malicious behavior, and as soon as we see that behavior, we are again taking all the logs from the SIEM to our SOAR using webhook. And once we have the logs coming to the SOAR, we are doing the threat intel for it in terms of analyzing the IP address, analyzing the file hash for it, again comparing it to other malware signature database. So different threat intel that you can leverage. There are so many open source threat intel databases also available. So we have leveraged those open source threat intel databases. And once we have the right orientation, the SOAR itself also opens up the ticket. It can also send the notification on email, SMS. So entire things get automated. And this is the workbook that we have agreed. We take a decision, and in this case, we are showing it as an action taken as isolating an endpoint. So again, the rule get pushed in the endpoint, so that endpoint is getting isolated. So those are the various use cases that have been built leveraging open source, and where the major advantage that we had is the community was involved with us and supporting us to build these use cases also, in terms of when we are doing it in the customer environment, also when we are testing it in our labs as well. So a lot of support that has been given by extended by the open source community. So that has really helped us. Just setting UDA from my side. Can move next. So the experience that we had when we were able to deliver the overall technology plus the people part of it, and also setting up the right strategies and the processes for our customers, where we are addressing a lot of point solutions, which is definitely giving a good reduction in the overall cost, and a tight integration which is actually required to meet the requirements. And when we normally the CISO, wherever we had an opportunity to offer the inventions as a platform, the entire the discussion has always changed because we have leveraged open source, where the customization was available, the support also was available from the community, and the way we have built it is like we are making it very cost effective for the customers. So when CISO goes and presents this inventions platform, which is again a combination of solutions, services, and strategy, he always gets a good positive feedback from the overall boardroom, where the CIO says that the all the people, process, and technology is being addressed now with the inventions platform. We have CFO who always has a comment saying that the overall budget, and we were able to save money part of it. The C is also happy when now people have started talking business sense. As a CRO, he is happy and he says that now we are all smiling. So that's the experience that come across using and leveraging open source. And people challenge which is there, which is also addressed since it is in combination for an CHRO as well. So that has been our approach towards the overall integrating the platform, where we are shifting the cost to value. We can move next, Sriti. So normally what we have seen all the time is like we have seen that people have a perception saying that open source is less secure since it is open source. And we have seen people not using open source since it is the community driven project. But then what we normally give it as an example, and what we have learned from the community also is since the source code is open, there are different contributors working on the same code. There is also a review mechanism set, and everybody can see what the others are doing. So it's actually getting reviewed and tracked very well. So they always give, like we have learned this from the community, where they give us an example that there is a classroom and where you have a lot of people sitting across, and there is a whiteboard and where people are supposed to write. Then everybody will be very careful in writing those codes. So it's like people are watching you what you are doing. So it's a good chance that the errors are decreased, the flaws are decreased, and you'll see a good code coming out. So that's the advantage that the open source world has. In this, like the example, you can see the classroom where people are sitting and there's a whiteboard. So that we can consider as an open source world, and they're all writing on the same board. So it's very difficult for somebody to write a wrong code in it. And when it's a closed source and people are writing codes, then probably everybody is not watching you. So there is a chance that you can make a mistake. It doesn't mean that proprietary world is facing this challenge, but yeah, there is a possibility for it. So that's where what we have always learned is open source. There is a good secured codes that are coming out because people are more responsible for it as a community. Move next. So for us, like by building this platform, we had a lot of learnings that came across us. First thing was like we reached out to all the different communities all across. We have a lot of people in US, Spain, Japan, Norway. So a lot of different countries where people are working together with our team. So that's the major learning in terms of collaborating with different people all across. What we have always learned is the people focus is on the innovation. So their focus is to build something very innovative. So open source is always committed to building some innovation out of it. The challenge that I would say, the learning that we have learned about the open source is the people who are building the open source projects, their mindset is more towards the technical and the problem solving in nature. So their focus is more on the technical side of it and not on the commercial side of it. So that's the learning that we have working with a lot of community all across. And the gap that we have seen is like a lot of projects where they have faced challenge in terms of how do we make this overall project a successful, sustainable model. So that's the challenge with the open source world definitely has. That those are the learnings where definitely there are a lot of innovations. The mindset is very focused on the technology, technical side of it. The challenge that we see with our learning is that how do we build a successful business model? So that's what we have seen with a lot of different projects, and what we have learned and what we should do, and what we have done also in terms of like when the companies like us are building some integrated platform or some services around it, leveraging open source. Uh, since these are open source community driven projects, they're very open to allow you contributing to this code, so you can also become a good contributor to the overall project. So that is something that we really recommend to people who are using open source, and we have started doing it and we would keep doing it also in terms of supporting the community with the required developers, required team for testing various codes, which we are in turn using to materialize in our customer environments as well. So that's the I would say thing that every company who is using open source or leveraging open source should be doing it. This definitely helps to solve a real world problem by building the ecosystem where you are collaborating with each other and you build a right ecosystem. And most importantly is like when people talk about open source, what we have learned is people think that it is free, but there is a community behind. There's a lot of pain that goes. We are building this particular projects, and that's where what we firmly believe is like FOSS doesn't mean that it is free. Definitely, source code is open and free, but what you need to do is you need to definitely build an ecosystem where you are supporting and you are also delivering the services required, which should be charged and which should be monetized as well. And the idea should be that we have a right ecosystem where there is a project, and that project definitely might not have a business model around it, but if you are making money out of it and if you are using that platform for overall integrated platform that you are building, or whatever project that you are trying to build out of those open source projects, you should definitely contribute to community also. So with our experience, what we have done is we have started contributing in terms of the developers, in terms of supporting financially as well to few of the projects. So that's the way forward that we see of what we have been doing now and what others should do as well. So that's what I wanted to share our journey towards how open source world with the culture of collaboration and the culture of helping each other helped us to build an integrated platform out of it. Finally, thanks to everybody who has been listening to this. And is there any questions which we can discuss? I would be very happy to talk.
Thank you, Mr. Jaydeep. I would now request Mr. Sandip Kumar Panda, CEO and co-founder Instasafe, to share his views on building products from open source capabilities. Welcome, Mr. Sandip.
Very good morning to everybody, and thank you for attending the DSCI Security Investors Conference. My name is Sandip Panda, and I'm the founder and CEO at Instasafe. Today, I'll be taking you through the interesting talking about how do you build products from open source capabilities. At Instasafe, also we started our journey, leveraging the open source, projects available quite extensively until we moved on to a platform which was much more closed source. But the interesting journey is that how quickly and how efficiently you could build products which are commercially available is what I'll be sharing with you today, and also telling you a lot more. Can we have the slides, please, Shrishti? So by 2035, commercially open source software will be a multi-trillion-dollar industry. To even come to this point, it's important to understand the evolution of how this industry started up. In the early 90s, we saw commercially off-the-shelf software, which was essentially shrink-wrapped software available from large companies, Microsoft, Adobe's, Oracle, and they built a very large industry out of it. Some changes happened in early 2000s when we started seeing, can we have the next slide, please? Yeah, thank you. In early 2000, we started seeing, application service providers, essentially those companies which were providing, open source software, but available on a subscription basis or on a rental basis or on a application basis. And this is where we saw the evolution of companies like Salesforce.com. There were many, many more, but then, SFDC is very popular. Towards the end of 2010, with the evolution of cloud, something more interesting happened. We saw companies which had a subsequent quite a substantially large open source community, and they started commercializing their software. GitLab is a very popular company there because they have completely open sourced their style of working. The GitLab handbook is literally the book to go for when you are building organizations. It's completely open sourced and available for everyone. But what we are seeing here is post 2010, commercially open source software being made available for enterprise by growing startups has grown up exponentially. Next slide, please. To understand how it has grown up, Y Combinator, which is a leading, accelerator in the US, how the evolution of, commercially open source software startups has grown up, right? While 2007 to 2019, you can see, typically about single-digit companies getting started up. By 2020-21, it had significantly risen up from single digits to double digits, and it's floating in the range of about 20-30 companies per year. So that's like a paradigm shift or a change. What we are seeing in the evolution of commercially open source software, right? And today these software compete with the best of the world, the largest of the players, and that ensures that customers are able to get some of the fastest or most modern features very quickly from emerging startups which are extensively leveraging open source software. Next slide, please. Now, we need to understand open source, what all we need to know, right? First and foremost, open source is ubiquitous. That means it's available always, right? It runs on key infrastructure. Today, the entire cloud infrastructure literally runs on free open source software, right? And it is definitely eclipsing proprietary software. Now, what does it mean, eclipsing proprietary software? We all know that closed source software, or package software was available, is available, and will be available for a long time. But fundamentally, open source software is going on and replacing a lot of those components with a substantially better economic impact or lower total cost of ownership, right? But with that, it's also important to understand that open source software comes along with its own challenges of speed, efficiency, security, accessibility, and a much better economic impact. Next slide, please. So while this is a very large topic and quite difficult to condense in a couple of minutes, but there are two very important publications or books published on this topic when it comes to understanding open source foundations. One is about the licensing model. To understand that, Hitamika has published Practical Guide to Open Source Software Licensing. It is very important to understand the variety of types of licensing available, GPL, NGPL, and bunch of other things. But practically speaking, today in the world of SaaS, things have become really very easy. But definitely it is important to keep an understanding of what licensing model you are getting into, because just as a word of caution, there are situations it happens when because of license violations, you might end up in a situation with a large enterprise or a customer. Then comes development model. Today, a lot of software or startups are building their companies where they have an open source community, and this is being leveraged extensively well. That provides a very good tailwind for building new features and going quickly to market. So the development model is a very good book, a pretty old book. They are written, The Cathedral and the Bazaar by Eric Raymond. If that is something you should definitely read about understanding the open source foundations. Next slide, please. Now, what we'll do is we'll spend the next couple of minutes understanding the evolution of commercial open source software. Early it started with services, providing just time and material services by founders or growing enterprises. From there, next it moved to support. How do we provide support for people who can freely download the open source software and use it for their own? From there, it moved on to packaged, and from there, it moved to subscriptions. And then today, with the evolution of cloud, things have migrated very fast into software as a service. Now, software as a service is a very interesting model where you kind of rent it from the cloud. The licensing models are very flexible. They're quite affordable. You do not have to invest in any upfront software. And fundamentally, it has completely changed the way software is consumed. I still remember at Instasafe, we today literally use all types of open source software for our internal purposes, right? Now that would not have been possible, a couple of years back, because we would have to invest in licensed software for running our own organization. And software as a service or SaaS subscriptions have really made the evolution of commercially open source software without needing to worry about the technicalities, the details involved, and then how to kind of manage and maintain them at a most affordable price. Next slide, please. Now, what we will do in today's session is understand extensively, and this largely goes with my experience or what I've seen around, is what does it take to build open source software typically ready for an enterprise. Now, this is where typically founders or growing organizations typically stumble upon or learn at the expense of customers' satisfaction, customer support issues. And we also had Instasafe in the early days of evolution of Instasafe. We kind of grew, know how what core features are required. And there's a very interesting website called Enterprise Ready. I would request all of you to go and check that out, extensively detailed along with examples. But here are some 11 categories that we will cover today in understanding how do you make an open source software enterprise ready. First, we'll talk about team management. The prior slide, please. We'll talk about team management. In team management, fundamentally, this is about building a system where enterprises typically have different departments and layers, and they would need an option or a feature where they could manage multiple teams. They would also need read-only access. They would need different types of access to the manager, to the auditor, to the finance, to the HR, to the actual engineer, to the architect. So having an option or a feature for team management is very critical. Next is about deployment options, delivered from the cloud, private deployments. These are very important things to understand depending on the kind of customers and segments that you're addressing. So again, keeping a note of that becomes very critical. And you don't want to sign up a POC with a customer and then realize that the deployment options do not help you. You lose a lot of time. Third most important topic is SLA or support. Now, this is where typically, rise the primary value add for organizations building out of open source. Getting trained and specialized talent is never easy. And even if it is possible, managing those SLAs and providing customer delight is one of the most important things, or key differentiators of open source based technology providers differentiating themselves in the marketplace. There is enough and more said about Rackspace fanatical support. Rackspace completely changed the game with their level of support and SLA, and it's worth example emulating for. The next most important topic is security. Now, open source software obviously is pretty robust because there is so much of contribution happening globally. But having said that, before you're deciding to build and company or based on open source technologies, it is important to understand the security implications and what you need to do in terms of investing so that the security of the tool that you're using is actually ready or available for enterprises. You do not want a situation where there are critical vulnerabilities exposed and then you got to patch it up only when the customer gets to know about it. My recommendation is there are today modern bug bounty platforms available. Instasafe also runs a bug bounty platform called SafeAds, and we provide free bounty vulnerability services to open source based projects. So if there is anything, please feel free to extensively use it. You will get access to a lot of security researchers, close to 5,000 of them, who can help you uncover vulnerabilities there. But this is probably one of the most important topics when it comes to servicing open source software to a commercial customer base. The next important is role-based access control. I still remember at Instasafe when we were in the early days. You know, in early days, you're more about shipping the right features. You're not constantly worried about providing a bunch of features about who is accessing, how it is accessing. And we remember a large retail client. Literally, we had to go and do our Active Directory LDAP integration at the customer's place. So customers are very flexible and open-minded, provided we keep communicating to them. And role-based access control is a very important feature that enterprises would typically expect. So it is much better to kind of be prepared and make available of this feature functionality to whatever an open source project that you're working on. Another important topic is single sign-on. Single sign-on has become very common nowadays, and it is very easy to also make available. It is all about staying conscious and making customers available of this an option. At Instasafe, we also provide, zero trust based single sign-on access. So if you are looking for your projects to be integrated, we are very happy to help you there. But nonetheless, there are so many options available to ensure that you offer single sign-on. Another important aspect is integrations. Now, customers, typically enterprise customers, when they're willing to pay for an open source software base, they're looking for customer delight, ease of usage, right, and simplicity in the entire offering. Now, integrations make that really easy. It is very much possible that you could also use integrations as a source of lead generation. Like in the way in the cyber world, it's all about integrations. At Instasafe, we saw integrations like endpoint companies integrations, SIM integrations. There are so many integrations that you could leverage to ensure customer delight, to ensure lead generations are done right. Because if your product is visible in large marketplaces, cloud marketplaces, or is able to seamlessly integrate to a large existing player, then you could piggy ride on the success of that also, and jump on the momentum that a typical integration partner is already offering in the market. Another important aspect is reporting. Typically software or cybersecurity software reporting plays an extremely important part. I'm sure every cybersecurity founder or technology leader knows that already about it. But providing extensive reporting, and when I say extensive reporting, it is not about providing more reporting because it would make things complicated, but understanding the business workflow of your customers and understanding the business workflow of your customer segment is very important to understand how you could build delightful reports and analytics that could clearly play as a differentiator for you. Again, another important topic is audit logging. Typically, founders who are working about cybersecurity software, audit logging is very, very important because they got to know what's the kind of access management, who are the privileged users, what is happening there. So do not miss out there on audit logging capabilities, and then ensuring that there are multiple compliance-related concerns in the financial services sector, in the government sector, where you could need to keep audit logs all the way from a couple of days and weeks to months and even years is important to understand there. Another very important topic that we also learned along the journey is product assortment. Now, while you're building an solution based out of open source software, it's pretty easy to kind of think of, okay, let me build and they will come. But it's important to understand that if you have a product assortment or a bunch of options available or features available at a particular price point, you could make things easy. Let's say you are servicing small and medium customers or mid-market customers or enterprise customers. Each customer segment has a very different class of need based on the above points that I shared, and more about what exactly are they looking for and how does the typical workflow help them and differentiate your product against others. So understanding product assortment, it is all about very transparently understanding which segment needs what functionalities primarily, and that would help you to price it effectively, thereby resulting in a lower total cost of ownership of the customer and making win leads or closing leads much faster and making it a win-win proposition for the customer and you. Lastly, change management. This is again very important from an audit and compliance perspective to ensure that you have features and functionalities inbuilt of how do you implement change management. At Instasafe, we have extensively worked and understood all of these. So if any founder is aspiring founder wants to learn how do you address enterprise needs, we would be very happy to help you out. Feel free to reach us out there. Otherwise, the source mentioned here, enterpriseready.io, is an extensive source of all of these functionalities explained quite in detail along with examples. Next slide, please. With this, I think I've come nearly to the end of my presentation, and it's very important to understand that an open source software project is not a product that you sell. You sell an experience, you sell your service, you build a business model that you understand how you want to kind of harvest in your market. What is the sweet spot that you want to figure out in your problem that you're solving, and what customer segment works for you, right? So this is never an easy job for any aspiring founder, existing founder and technology executive. This is a long journey. More details about it, about product market fit, about founder market fit, and things like that. But yes, open source is just the piece of code. There is a lot more around it, and please pay cognizance to it. With this, I think I've come to the end of my presentation and time. If there are any questions, feel free to ask me on my Twitter link. Direct message me at Sandip KP. And thank you so much, Data Security Council of India, for the opportunity.
Mr. Sandeep. Thank you, Mr. Sandeep. Thank you, Mr. Sandeep and Mr. Jaydeep. We now move on to our next session in the main auditorium. I request everyone to move on to the main auditorium. Thank you.